That was incredible. I'm Heidi Kreiser-Daroff, and on behalf of the Israel Forever Foundation, I want to thank EMET, Sarah Stern and her team at EMET so much for inviting Israel Forever to co-sponsor this incredible and important film. And we're so lucky to have Andrea Gottlieb here from Jerusalem Online U with us. And I want to thank you too, Andrea, for helping to make this incredible film and get it out there. And I want to thank Aviv Regev for being here to speak with us today, and to all of you who came out on this cold and snowy Wednesday. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the Lone Soldier Project of the Israel Forever Foundation is dedicated to raising awareness of the sacrifices that lone soldiers make. And watching Oren's story from Switzerland just drove home the importance of the work that our foundation tries to do to raise awareness and gratitude that we have for all the lone soldiers and native-born Israelis who serve past and present and future for all that they do. And now, Aviv, if you'll join us up here, we're going to have questions and answers. So if you have a question for Aviv, please raise your hand, and we'll call on you one by one.
Can you repeat the question?
Why the stretchers along the march?
No, you wanted to know why only two?
Why only two? Because only two fit in the frame when we take the picture. There's a lot more actually. On every 12 soldiers, there's one. So 10 actually. But I'd like to touch on that because we do a lot of physical training, but when you look on a lot of Israeli soldiers, they're like me, they're skinny, I need to put rocks in their pockets and not fly off. And I had this Marine sit next to me on the plane, and it was like this mountain sitting next to me. Unbelievable. And it's because we focus on training our soldiers mentally. This march, in a war, they won't walk 40 or 50 miles, or after they become paratroopers, we had a march from Haifa to the Dead Sea, 120 miles. But it's not because they'll walk such a length, it's because mentally they need to understand that there's no limits to what we decide to do. And that's why the IDF is considered such a strong army, and it will carry more weight and walk further than any other army because of that type of training. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes?
So out of the soldiers that started the paratroopers course, out of say 100, I don't know how many were in the platoon, but how many finish? And are there people who don't finish? I understand how you wouldn't focus on them in films, but...
So the company is 120 soldiers. The film focuses on one of the platoons. So in each company you have 3 platoons of 40 soldiers each. I'd say about a third doesn't finish. It really varies from each company to company. In this one, about a third dropped out because of injuries, mostly, and some because of other issues of not fitting in or having other types of difficulties. They usually go on to do different types of desk jobs inside the paratroopers. Thank you. Yes?
Yeah, there are a couple of questions. One, how many armies enable their soldiers to go home on weekends? That strikes me as kind of amazing.
Well, I only know about one army. I've served only in the IDF, so I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I see. Okay, fine. In terms of the hierarchy, you say that there is no West Point or Sandhurst or whatever the equivalent is. So the commanders watch the soldiers in terms of who performs best, and then they recommend them to go on to these other levels of training?
Yes, that's an excellent point. What happens is that the best soldiers inside the platoon are marked for squad leader command, which means they have the command of 4 to 6 soldiers. Those that do the best job as squad leaders are promoted to sergeants. Now they have 12 soldiers. The best sergeants are sent to officers' school after they were in the army for at least a period of a year inside the army as soldiers. And then the best platoon officers become deputy company commanders and so on. So that's kind of how it works. You have to always prove yourself in your current rank to rise to the next rank.
So there is an officers' school. So how long are the courses there?
There is. It's 8 months, but you have to be a soldier first. You can't start from officers' school. You have to.
Yeah, and one last question about women in the Army. there was a woman shown here in leadership, but what kind of integration? Do the young women train completely separately? Where is the integration, or isn't it?
So, as you saw here, she was a commander in pre-paratroopers base, like pre-basic training, a base that educates immigrants about Hebrew, about the culture, and kind of gives them a soft landing into the real army, you could say. So that's one thing. There's also a combat unit for women. And I wouldn't want to deal with them in a dark alley. And yeah, tough unit that has girls in it. And so it really varies. We have pilots that are women, and they're all over the army.
So when do they get together with the men?
When they go home for vacation. But it's not simple. A lot of hormones, teenagers, it's something that we strictly keep. There's a very thin line that you cross, that you make sure you don't cross in order to have a standard way of life in the army. Yes.
If it's any consolation, I went into college, I was 105 pounds. 5 years later, I was 110. They turned me down for giving blood at the blood bank. Now I'm 130 and they accept me.
I actually went up 30 pounds in the army because of just from exercising, muscle weight.
Well, that's interesting because that's only a few years. It took me about 35 years to go from 110 to 130.
Yes, yeah.
How many training jumps do you do, or do you do more jumps once you completed the basic training?
So the start is 5 jumps. You saw it was really nice. They're jumping into the sunset. It's there's a beach nearby. It looks very fun, and they're all happy about it. But for me, it was the worst part about being a paratrooper is actually jumping out of planes. I did around 20 jumps, but it varies from paratrooper to paratrooper. And usually it's at night. You're jumping into this black hole, and you know that you're going to be walking the whole night afterwards, and you don't know if you're going to land on a rock or a bush or a tree or on a camel. You have no idea where you're going to land. So that's about parachuting. Yes. Wait, you had a question already? Yes.
Thank you. I don't remember the soldiers' names, but my question is about the commander who had ADD and the woman who was thinking about leaving Israel. And they were the right people for those positions. And I was wondering, is that just by luck that they were chosen in those roles, or does the IDF strategically think about who to put in those leadership roles?
I'm glad you brought that up because in the IDF, they start scouting for soldiers in 11th grade. So in 11th and 12th grade, you find yourself finishing your homework and going to tryouts for the Army or doing all these different types of physical and mental exams. And you get selected into different places by what the Army sees you most qualified for. I wanted to be a naval officer. Found myself jumping out of planes because the Army told me I'd do that better. But inside, once you're already inside, Eden had to prove himself. Not that he couldn't just be a commander right away. He had to be an excellent soldier, a squad leader, a sergeant. Only then was he given the opportunity to command a platoon. Yes.
So, regarding that time frame, I mean, Ed was 20 years old. I mean, in the States, you can't even be an officer grade on college. So, it seems like from 18 to 20, going from private, sergeant, to first lieutenant, that's an interesting transition. How are you guys able to do that? Is it because of the fact that everybody has to serve and it's a certain thing within the IDF?
Well, you get these, this big responsibility is kind of just dropped on you, and you understand that if you won't deal with it, if you don't deal with what's coming your way head on, then no one else will. And it gives you a lot of strength to realize that you're literally fighting for your family, for your people and your country. And you feel it on a day-to-day basis, so it gives you a lot of strength. It's not easy. It's not like there's a manual on how to be a good commander or officer. You're always asking yourself, am I doing the right job? Am I on the right track? And you kind of find yourself inventing it as you go along because you don't really have any past life experiences to rely on. I'm not sure how many people at all have such a responsibility over 40 people, not to say at the age of 20, 21. So that's definitely a big issue for us. Yes?
First of all, high school students, when they have to try out, do they try to volunteer for the more dangerous units? Is there, or what is the morale like? Or do they want to serve, or are they keen to get a little turned off?
Well, it really varies from place to place. Like you saw the girl, she said, I didn't want to serve in the army. Ed knew before he went to the army that he wanted to serve in a combat unit. It's very personal, and it depends on where that person grew up in his culture. So we'll take one more question, or a few more. How are we on time?
Oh, you could, as long as, until 2 o'clock.
All the way, we'll have dinner, yes.
In the U.S. Army, they have all these vocational aptitude tests, everything to go. I don't quite understand how it works in the Israeli Army. We talked about some opportunities when you're still in high school to see some of the different anafim, as you call it. But I'm not clear what happens if you don't have those opportunities. How then are you able to make a choice, or does the Army choose for you where you go?
The Army chooses for you.
It's the same in every army.
How they do these physical exams that you're required to go to, and based on those exams and an interview and mental and physical exams and a psychologist, all those things together, they try to give you a few options to choose from, but sometimes they tell you that you're doing
So
this.
that is the first week or two when you're ready to submit?
No, that's during high school.
Everybody.
Yes.
A couple of things. First, thank you for your service. I understand that by agreeing to become an officer, you take on the obligation to serve extra reserve duty afterwards. Isn't that correct? So
Yeah, you signed
say a
for
little
it.
words about your personal story, if you don't mind. And second question, the actual parachute drop, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure that you guys haven't used it in combat in a generation or more.
I'll touch on that. That's true. Since 56. So first of all, for me personally, as an officer, you sign for almost an extra 2 years in active duty, and then in the reserves, you do 20 days extra a year. So instead of the regular month that most soldiers do, you do almost 2 months every year. And that's something that's quite incredible. I've only been to one of these reserves training. I'm the youngest in my platoon, but I'm the commander. I have soldiers from 30 to 43. Some even have kids already in the army. And they put aside their wife, their job, their kids, and they come back to the army and they ask you, can I go to the bathroom? And whatnot. Just like that, we're training and they walk all night with 80 pounds of gear on them, and they do the exercises, and it's unbelievable. They're lawyers, engineers, and bankers, and just, it's really something that's extraordinary about Israel, and I feel I have a very big privilege to be a part of it. As for the paratroopers, we do a lot of training, not just jumping out of planes, it's with helicopters, with ships. The mentality is to fight when you're surrounded by 360 degrees. It doesn't really matter how you get there. You might actually walk there, you might be parachuted, but the idea is to fight behind the enemy lines, you can say. So that's what we train for, even though there have only been 2 operational jumps. So I think I'll summarize. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to come up to me and ask me personally. I didn't think that I'd come here to the States when I finished my service, and it was because it's not at the top of your to-do list. After 5 years, you just want to go on with your life. For me, it was electrical engineering and physics. That's what my calling in life is, and that's what I wanted to start doing. But I also went on the Israeli trip. We have, after the army trip, you go to India or Thailand or something like that. And for me, it was crossing China by myself, from north to south, around 2,000 miles, and then hiking in New Zealand for a couple hundred miles. And it was during that time that I met a lot of teenagers my age from over a dozen countries. They were asking me questions about Israel that was ridiculous. They were just ridiculous, and that's what got me to come here to the States, to understand that there was this whole other war going on, and that I don't need a uniform to defend Israel. And if there's one thing that I'd like you to take from here today, is the next time that you hear something in the headlines about Israel, to remember this film, to remember one of the faces from this film, one of the stories, to remember that behind the headlines, beneath the helmet, we're just teenagers that want to live our lives happily and peacefully. So thank you very much.